Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. How's it going? Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back. What we got going on today?
All right, so guess what? Today's show comes to us from another listener, Christine.
Oh, I like it. I like how the listeners are engaging.
Me too. I do love it. I was contacted through our Malice in the Mitten Facebook page, and I was asked if I do unsolved cases for the show. And of course, I'm like, yeah, I'm all in. She told me of a tragedy of an entire family that was murdered at their summer cabin way up north of Michigan. She said, quote, "It's just one of those stories, events that kind of just sticks with you." She had sent me a couple of book titles that are written about the Robinsons to get me started. And thank the gods for Audible, because Todd and I have been so busy this last week preparing for our family get-together. There was no way I had time to sit down and read. So I listened over and over while I was cleaning, pulling weeds, and cooking. Now, my main source for this show is from a book written by Marty Link called When Evil Came to Goodheart, an up north Michigan cold case. The other book she sent me is called Dead End by James J. Pecora. So do you, Lynn Carlson Zeibel. I can't thank you enough for reaching out. I now, like you, will always have a place in my heart for the Robison family and the horrible end that they met. So today's episode is a huge story. So I'm just going to throw it out there now that this will be a two-parter. This is also still an open case. I can't really say much more to you other than that right now. So let's get into it. This is Season 2, Episode 16, The Robison Family Massacre. It's 1968, and it is summertime in Michigan. And if you're lucky enough to have a place on Lake Michigan, or if you plan far enough in advance, you could rent a place for a pretty penny, but cost aside, you will have the most incredible summer experience. Whether you have a lot of activities planned, or if your idea of a great time is to simply kick back, relax, gaze at a freshwater ocean, enjoy a bonfire, and see the starlit sky like never before, this is the place to do it. Christine, I know you've been to Traverse City before. We had that conversation when we did the Kaylee Bruce story. But have you ever heard of Goodheart, Michigan?
I've always been to Michigan on business, so it's usually, in the more populated areas.
Gotcha. Well, until I read about the Robinson family, I hadn't heard of it either. It's at the tippy top of the Mitten on the northeast side. So I'm going to do that thing with the hands. So if you look down at your left hand, palm down, the left side of the tip of your middle finger, that's where it is. The Mackinac Bridge is just a hop, skip, and a jump from Goodheart. And that bridge will take you to what us Michiganders call the UP, which is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
The tip of the middle finger, is that near the water, though? I thought the water was all, near the left-hand side of the Mitten.
Girl, you better look at a map. Michigan is surrounded by water.
Yeah, I know that, but when you do the whole Mitten thing, see, I'm not a Michigander. I'm never gonna get that Mitten
thing. So think about it. If you just look at your hand, if you put it down on anything, all the way around except the very bottom, where your wrist would start, all surrounded by the Great Lakes.
I think I get that now. All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. All right. So Goodheart is the place to be to get away from it all. And if you don't know how to get there, well then, good luck. It's very remote and tucked deep into the woods. This is an area of winding bluffs overlooking Lake Michigan. So let's start with a little history of this neck of the woods. American Indian villages were all along Lake Michigan shoreline, including Cross Village, Middle Village, which we now call Goodheart, 7 Mile Point, as it's 7 miles north of Harbor Springs, and lastly, Harbor Springs. The Ottawa Indians, known as the Wakasining Ottawa, their ancestral homeland was here in the Middle Village, again, aka Good Heart. Wakasining is the land of the crooked tree. There is a book called The Crooked Tree, Indian Legends and a Short History of the Little Traverse Bay Regions. Quote, a tall, crooked pine tree overhanging a high bluff served to designate what was probably the most important Indian village in the north prior to the advent of the white man. Pronounced Wagonakisa, the crooked tree could be seen for many miles by the occupants of approaching canoes. After rounding the northwestern extremity of what is now Emmett County in the state of Michigan on their way south, it was a familiar sight and one that never failed to bring joy from the brave and daring Ottawas. Tradition says it's in the vicinity of Middle Village. According to the legend, it was bent by Nana Bojo. The tree used to be straight, but as the great hunter and chieftain was climbing the hill one day, his canoe over his head, the end of the boat caught on the tree and gave him a bad fall. In anger, he struck the tree, a blow with his fist, and bent it over. Where he hit the trunk, a large swelling came out, and henceforward, every knot or growth protruding from the tree was called Nana Bojo's fist. Another name for the crooked tree came from the French in the region of Cross Village to Harbor Springs, and they named it Labra Groche. Perhaps this name for the crooked tree stuck as it is seen on historical markers, also along with the Wakasining name, is because it's much easier to say for most. But as hard as it is for me to say, I prefer Wagonakasining. And you're probably going to hear me pronounce that differently every time I say it. But I'm trying. Just south of Good Heart along Shore Drive is Devil's Elbow. Indian legend says the Devil's Elbow marks the location where the devil scooped out a giant hollow after the Native Americans suffered a rampant plague. The original sign that's posted says this: Devil's Elbow. A flowing spring in this ravine was believed by Indian tribes to be the home of an evil spirit who haunted the locality during the hours of darkness. Just north of Good Heart is the Old Council Tree. Famous tribal councils were held here. One of the most infamous involved the Menominee, Chippewa, and Ottawa tribes after the massacre at Fort Michilimackinac in July of 1763 against the British.
This is a lot of Indian words for you, Trace. Are you sure you're going to make it through this story?
I'm totally going to do this. Like I said, I might say it differently each time, but I'm trying my best.
Okay.
We had a lot of American Indians here. A lot.
I know. I've been thinking a lot about them lately.
Have ya?
Yeah. I'm not a very... I kind of stay in my lane, you know what I mean? I'm not very into everything that's on the news and everything, but I just think it's funny, everything that's on the news, we don't talk about them too much. But anyway, let's not get into that. Let's talk more about the Indians. Go ahead, tell me more.
All right. So another Indian legend is this. An ominous drum is said to be heard in the air each time a life is lost in the treacherous waters of northern Lake Michigan. Fur trading, fishing, farming, and logging were among the industries here. As time marched on in the early 1900s, Good Heart was booming as a place to get away to, a place for the wealthy to summer from big cities such as Detroit, Chicago, and St. Louis. It was in 1896 when the first gasoline-powered vehicles emerged, and this put Michigan on the map as the automotive state. I mean, think about it. Lakefront bluffside resorts for the summer. Now we can drive there? Yeah, count me in.
Yeah, that was probably a big shift in how people vacationed when we got the automotive invented.
Yeah, think about it. No more horse and buggy.
I know. You can go a lot farther. Yeah, definitely. Sure.
Yeah, a 4-hour drive would probably take you a couple days.
Yeah, to think about, right?
Yeah, and it would hurt. Right? Those.
And you'd freeze and starve and lots of bad things.
Yeah, it was treacherous trying to go on a vacation. Forget it. Just stay home.
Yeah. Exactly.
So a few resorts were emerging, such as Lambkin Lodge, which is located at the base of Goodhart, Crude Craft Lodge, just a couple of miles north of Goodhart, but the one in today's story is Blisswood. In lieu of payment for Civil War service in the 1860s, the Bliss family was deeded a piece of land overlooking northern Lake Michigan. Chauncey P. Bliss and his son Chauncey A. Bliss lived in Goodhart. The Bliss family shifted from farming to building. They built a sawmill and started making log homes with the natural resources that surrounded them. The log homes they built were all different and unique. The stone bases were selected from the hands of Native Americans from the Blisswood shore of Lake Michigan. Much of the work in constructing the log cabins were done by Native Americans. From the Blisswood website, History tab, quote, "The exterior of the Blisswood cabins is a distinctive indication of Ottawa life here, and their use of elm bark as siding on the gable ends of the main lodge and cabins. For centuries, the Ottawa Indians used elm bark as a primary covering for their own living structures in this area. Their influence around historic Blisswood abounds, and their presence in the immediate area remains today. The cabins were built in 1929, and if you go to blisswoodmichigan.com, you can read the history, and you can also rent their unique cabins, which are the Moose Cabin, built in 1941, the Merganser Cabin, built in the 1940s, or the Perch Cabin, which was built in the 1930s. You can even rent the entire Blisswood property if you so desire and have a deep enough pocket. There's just something about being at the lake, but to then sit atop of a bluff, surrounded by woods on one side, and with the coup de grace being the view of Lake Michigan. There's nothing better than watching the sunsets, listening to the lake, and listening to all the nature that surrounds you. I can't think of any other place I'd like to be with my family. Being in a place of such beauty brings a human back to the basics of life. It brings peace and serenity, and being in a place like this melts away all stressors in life, and you just feel at peace, one with nature. Now again, I have never been to Goodhart, but I've stayed in a cottage at Lake Michigan, not as far north as this, and I still reflect on the peace and tranquility I felt for that week. It just never leaves you.
Okay, here you go again, Trace. You're painting this blissful picture of this serene, peaceful place, but I know what we're here to talk about. You're about to kill all this peacefulness.
I know.
With treachery and malice. Why do you do that?
Well, there's a reason.
I know. You're giving me peace and serenity and tranquility.
Yes.
And you're going to taint my mind with malice.
Yeah, and then I'm going to rip the rug right out from under you.
I know, but can we just talk about cabins? I did live in a log cabin for a little bit. I went through a period of my life where we were like, let's try this out. And I had a whole ranch, farm, whatever you want to call it, couple of acres and a log cabin. I didn't do it up in Michigan. I did it down in Florida, so it was a little different. But it was kind of cool. It was awesome. Still to this day, I reflect and say, should I have sold that cabin? Because I still am like, log cabins are the best. They just are. They're a lot to keep up. They're a lot to maintain. You have to do some work to keep them in pristine condition. But for the most part, there's something about them. They are very peaceful. So up at the waterside in a beautiful setting. I mean, I had it on some property, but it was Florida. Not a lot of mountains and water and all that. You know, I wasn't on the coast. So I'm interested. I think it sounds like a great, peaceful place. Yeah, I'm on board, but I know where we're going with this, so I'm a little bit nervous.
I know. I got to keep you on the edge of your seat. All right, so let's talk about the cabins a little bit more. So there were some very unique trademarks of these cabins, such as their hinges, their door handles, and latch string locks that were handcrafted and forged on the property. And you will see these on the kitchen cabinets and interior and exterior doors. The Bliss cabins are known as some of America's finest and most unique log structures. This is a place that is on my bucket list for sure. And you can rent them. So I'm thinking another destination we got to go check out.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. July 8th, 2024 is the date that this podcast airs about the Robinsons, and as of June 25th, 2024, it has been 56 years since the massacre of the Robinson family at their summer cottage, which they lovingly named Somerset, located in Good Heart in Blisswood. The Robisons bought their cottage in the 1950s and never missed family time in the summer at the lake. Somerset sat at the end of a very long private driveway, shrouded in the thick woods. However, the beauty was the cottage had a section alongside a 100-foot bluff overlooking the beautiful Lake Michigan shoreline. So, who were the Robisons? Let's start with Richard Robison. He was born in November of 1925, but everyone called him Dick. He had attended college, and this is where he met his future wife, Shirley Fulton, in the mid-1940s. The couple married in 1947, and they had 4 children. Richard Jr., born in 1948. Gary, born in 1951. Randall, born in 1955. And lastly, their daughter, Susan. She was born in 1960. Dick owned an advertisement agency named R.C. Robison and Associates. He worked as a commercial artist, and he also started a magazine named Impresario, which focused on the arts and cultural issues. Dick and Shirley had a good life and lived in Lathrop Village, which is a very affluent suburb of Detroit. When it came to his professional life, if Dick liked you, he would do anything for you, trust you completely. If he knew you had his back, he certainly had yours. But if he didn't like you, you wouldn't last long. Family man he was, but he also had a desire for other things. He liked his secretaries young, he liked them beautiful, and most of all, they had to have great legs. Dick went through his share of secretaries. He couldn't seem to keep any employed for more than a year, some much less. He would request that they come to his office after hours and close the door. He would also request that they hike up their skirts so he could admire their legs. Now, he never did anything to them physically. He would just stare, and that's creepy. The gawking sessions could last as long as an hour, and when he had his fill, they would simply just be dismissed. They all knew what it meant when Dick requested the after-hours visit to his office. Dick preferred to work from home quite a bit, and because he was working at home, a time or two he would request his current secretary to bring some files to him. When they would get there, Dick would be basically in nothing more than a smoking jacket. He lost a couple of secretaries quickly with this kind of nonsense.
Okay, so you set him up to be somebody that I'm rooting for Mellis to happen to. I'm just saying. Beautiful surroundings, but now a guy that's asking for it. For the karma, at least.
Yeah, he had a little dark side. But that's kind of as dark as it gets, so...
Yeah, but in that time frame, he was the stereotypical businessman. You just like to touch on topics that like me to get on soapboxes.
I know, I like to rally up a little bit. I like to poke the bear. In 1965, Dick had hired a man by the name of Joseph Raymond Scalaro III. He was just 30 years old. Joe had attended Harvard and was also an Army veteran. He had an affinity for guns and was a competitive trap shooter, meaning he was a great shot, good hand-eye coordination, and would blast those clay ducks to puffs of dirt in the sky. Dick took a shining to Joe, after all. He was confident, had a high IQ, but the bottom line was that Dick trusted Joe completely, so much so that he would put Joe in charge of his business dealings while he was at home working because he didn't want to be bothered. I mean, after all, Dick was a very hard-working man, and I think he felt he was at a place in his life where he could be out of the office, keep raking in the money, but have others deal with the day-to-day business. This type of work ethic, however, was a bit annoying to Dick's clients because they wanted to talk to him, not to Joe. He was just never around to answer the calls that were coming in for him. the days before cell phones. Oh my goodness. So one thing about Joe, though, he was an impulse buyer. He liked money, but he was really, really bad at managing it. Scalero owned 2 model AR-7 22 caliber rifles. Scalero also bought 2 matching 25 caliber Beretta pistols. He kept one for himself and gave the others to Dick. Dick basically gave carte blanche to Joe, meaning anything that needed to be handled, Joe handled it. Calls, money, hiring, firing, raises, you name it, Dick deferred to Joe to handle it. Before Dick had put Joe in the position he had, Dick was more engaged with his company. Before he ever made a purchase, hired an employee, or gave a raise to an employee, he would always check in with his accountants. He'd say, "Hey, I'd like to buy a private plane. Do I have enough money to do that?" Or, "Hey, I'd like to hire or give someone a raise. Do I have enough money to do that?" He would never move forward without the okay. But soon that all stopped. Joe was in control, and Dick made sure everyone knew it. Basically, it was like, "Hey, I'm out for a few weeks at a time. Don't bother me. Talk to Joe." So that's how it rolled.
Okay, so he's setting himself up to be conned, is what it sounds like to me.
Good pickup.
Okay. Yeah, because people do as people do. Greedy, greedy, greedy once they get to that point.
You know it.
All right, so
All right.
you're going to start telling us how Joe's screwing him over.
I'm going to get there.
All right. Yeah.
I'm going to keep stringing you along for a while. I'm going to keep stringing you along for a while. Okay, so Shirley, Dick's wife, was a stay-at-home mom. She tended to the home, her husband, and their 4 children. There was never a toy left in the yard or a bike in the driveway. Her home was always tidy. Everything was in its place. Shirley was a kind woman, and if she knew you were not feeling well, she would call to check in on you and ask if there was anything she could do or bring something for you. Shirley enjoyed entertaining her friends in her home. For example, she had hosted a women's gathering at her home around Christmas time. It was a dinner party of sorts. For every woman who attended, they parted with an individually planted poinsettia just for them. Seems to me that she was always thinking of ways to make someone feel special. Shirley was not one to gossip, and if you were a friend of hers, you would never, ever hear her talk about her private life. She kept her private life securely private. Getting away to their cabin with her husband and children for the summer was something she looked forward to most. There was just something about being at Somerset in good heart that must have just revitalized her. Well, the long-awaited summer had finally arrived. It was Saturday, June 15th, 1968. Shirley and all 4 of her children were visiting Aileen Fulton, her mother, the night before the family would head north to Somerset for the season. Aileen, Shirley, and the children all had eaten lunch together. Susan, the youngest of the 4 children, was running around, in and out of the house. After lunch, Aileen and Shirley were sipping their coffee and chatting. Finally, Shirley told her mother that it was time for her to head home. She needed to get packed up for the summer and head to Somerset. She told her mother, quote, "When I get up there, I'm just going to kick my shoes from the back door entrance completely across the room, and I'm going to leave him there and stretch out on the couch. I'm tired of the house cleaning, going out, and entertaining. I'm ready to rest." In 1968, Aileen's brother was suffering with cancer. Shirley's father had also passed away 3 years prior. Shirley had invited Aileen to come with them to Somerset. Perhaps Shirley knew that the time away with the family in Somerset would help soothe her mother's aching heart. Like I said in the beginning of the show, there is something about being at the lake that melts everything away. And to me, it's like a cleansing, a reset. But for whatever reason, Aileen declined the invitation. She had decided to stay home for the summer. And before Shirley packed up with the children and headed home to prepare for their summer getaway, her mother took note of her 3 3/4 diamond ring and said, "You should probably leave that home." But Shirley said, "No way. I'm never taking it off. It's just fine." It's now Sunday, June 16th. Bags are packed, kids in tow, and I can just imagine what it sounds like in the car. You know what I'm talking about. It's that excitement of getting away to your magical place at the lake. Games of cards, playing on the shore of the lake, staring at the night sky. Nothing but peace and serenity, especially for Shirley. But for Dick, he had business dealings in mind. Big dealings, to say the least. For Shirley, she wanted to relax. But for Dick, he was planning to fly the family down to Kentucky and Florida in just a couple of weeks in his private plane. He was interested in a couple of new business ventures. In Kentucky, he was looking into buying a horse farm. His pride and joy, Sarah, his youngest child and only daughter, just loved horses. And in Florida, he was looking into buying investment properties. He had told a few people, especially the owners of Blisswood, after they arrived, that he would be taking his family and a business associate of his down south, and they would be gone for a few weeks. Monty Bliss would keep an eye on the cabin for them while they were gone. Dick had taken a few calls at the cabin related to their upcoming trip, presumably people related to the deals in Kentucky and Florida. While the Robisons were at Somerset, Eileen would often call and talk to Shirley because talking with her daughter always made her feel better. It's now July 7th. Aileen's brother, the one who had cancer, he had passed away. And with a broken heart and a need to speak with her daughter, she kept calling the cabin, but could not get a hold of her daughter, or anyone for that matter. She just kept calling and calling and calling. 2 weeks of calling, still nothing. She just needed to hear her daughter's voice. If she could just hear her, something so simple to help her cope. But still nothing. So she reached out to Dick's sister. Nothing. She called Monty Bliss. Nothing. All Eileen could do now was imagine the worst of the worst. Quote, like they might have gassed. The furnace might have been on the blink. Or that something in their sleep. Or maybe there was a plane crash. She, meaning Shirley, we were very close. She was my only daughter. End quote. Eileen then placed a call to Joe Scalero, but he did everything to reassure her that the family was just fine. They'd be home July 20th. But Joe's smooth talking and pacification didn't settle her nagging thoughts. One night she had a dream. She dreamt that her husband, Dick, Shirley, and their 4 children were all together. Quote, they were all in a back bedroom, laughing and talking, but they wouldn't let me come in there. I was just standing in the hallway, and they were all laughing, talking, and giggling. Aileen had told a couple of friends about her dream, along with her worried mind about something happening to her daughter and their family. Her friends tried to reassure her that this was just a dream, nothing more. But to Eileen, she knew differently. This wasn't just a dream. To her, this was very real. To her, she could feel the vibration of it.
She was having a premonition, no doubt. Ugh.
It's now July 26th, 1968. It had been approximately 3 weeks since Eileen had been able to contact her daughter or anyone at the cabin. Her neighbor called her over to have coffee, hollering from her yard, but Eileen had already had a cup of coffee that morning. However, with the way she had been feeling for weeks, and now her neighbor politely continuing to push her to come over, even though she had already had her coffee, Eileen was like, something doesn't feel right. Call it a mother's intuition. Eileen just knew this wasn't good. She did not refuse the invitation and walked over. While she was at the neighbor's, it wasn't long before Eileen's son Marvin and his wife Barbara arrived. Aileen looked at them and said, quote, you don't have to tell me about it. I know. Something has happened to the whole family. End quote. Now that's where we're going to end this episode. I'm sorry, I know it's a cliffhanger, but I really can't move forward.
Jerk move, but now listen, actually, probably a really good move for the podcast, but jerk move for me because you got right to the point where I don't understand why her neighbors would know something that she doesn't know. Like, why would she think she's getting invited over her neighbor's house and all of a sudden get overcome with, they're going to give me bad news?
Well, I don't know either, and I didn't see why, because I'm thinking clearly if Eileen's brother somehow contacted the neighbor, and I don't I don't know, maybe there's a really close friendship. Maybe he wanted another woman to be there. I don't know why her brother and his wife just didn't come to her house. The whole thing is a little weird, but that's how it went down.
Okay. Well, damn. Now I gotta wait. I gotta wait until our next one.
Yeah.
I gotta wait for our next chat to hear the rest of this.
That's right. See, I'm going to
Cool.
keep you coming back. I'm digging in those hooks. Digging
Yeah,
them in.
not cool, dude. Not cool.
I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's whoa, this next Malice Monday is going to be one heck of a story because we're really going to get into it. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming back and listening. Make sure you come back next Malice Monday for part 2 of the Robison's Massacre at Good Heart. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week. We'll see you back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Take care,
All right.
everyone.
See you soon, everybody. Bye.
Bye.